Welcome to the Inside Story. I'm Billy Hallowell, and today we are here with an update on the Federal Trade Commission. I am joined by Christian Post's Brandon Showalter. How you doing?
Hi, Billy. So good to be with you as always.
Well, we have an update. You were on the show not that long ago, and we were previewing the Federal Trade Commission workshop on unfair or deceptive trade practices surrounding gender-affirming care for minors. And this event happened this week. You were one of the speakers. Not only did you attend, you spoke at this event. Now, for those who don't know, we'll get into the event itself, but let's just pull back a little bit because some people might not be aware that this was even going on with the FTC. What was this workshop?
The FTC workshop, the Federal Trade Commission workshop, was, as you said, about the practices about so called gender affirming care for minors. And the FTC's purview is to protect American consumers from fraudulent, deceptive trade practices. And so, wherever snake oil is being sold, wherever there are deceptive, marketing, advertising, misleading claims about products and services, that's their regulatory perch. That's what they do. Obviously, there have been all kinds of junk, products sold over the years, even within the medical realm. Drugs that are promised to cure disease that do not, misleading, false advertising, fraudulent practices. That's what they do. And to be honest with you, Billy, I hadn't ever really thought about the Federal Trade Commission as an agency that could tackle uh, so-called gender-affirming care. But when you actually think about it, it's kind of perfect because the entire premise of puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and transgender surgeries, especially for children, relies upon a foundational lie and fraud that it's actually possible to be born in the wrong body. And so when you have that as your basis of the product and the services that you're selling, of course it's going to be damaging because no one has ever been or ever will be born in the incorrect body. And so what yesterday was a day-long seminar, 6 different panels and some other presentations from, if I do say so myself, the cream of the crop, top voices in the nation who have been contending against this child abuse and medical scandal known as so-called gender-affirming care. And so many different angles, so many different perspectives. There were obviously conservative Christians like me, but there were lefty LGB persons and doctors and Jews, Christians, non-religious people. I mean, it's just from a variety of professions. They had whistleblowers, they had parent advocates, they had detransitioners and their parents, and desisters and their parents, and other policy people. It was quite a day. And so, what the FTC does when they do these workshops, and this is by far from the only one that they've done, it's the predicate for some action that they will then likely take. The commissioners will take a vote, and that they will launch, civil fraud investigations into whatever fraudulent activity is going on. Chad Mizell, who is Attorney General Bondi's chief of staff, was there yesterday proctoring one of the panels, and the news broke yesterday, or Wednesday rather, during the session, that 20 subpoenas had been issued as they're going after the transgender industry, these clinics. Attorney General Bondi is very good on this issue, and so already some meaningful things are in motion, and I would anticipate that we're going to be seeing some investigations into the fraud of so-called gender-affirming care in the coming days. And it's funny, a lot of people have mentioned, 4 different people have mentioned to me in the past day or so that this reminds me of the time, like, Al Capone, despite him being a serious criminal, what ultimately got him was tax evasion or fraud. So maybe we thought that medical malpractice lawsuits were going to take down the transgender industry, but it very well may be deceptive trade practices that do them in. We will see. But it was an extraordinary day, all day long, the most unequivocal bastion of truth tellers I've seen and known in this space for years. And it was an honor.
Well,
I was a speaker on the final panel, too, so that was kind of nice.
and we'll talk about that specifically in a moment, but one of the most remarkable things is to go from an administration, I mean, 6 to 8 months ago, you had an administration that was pushing, in many ways, the transitioning of underage Americans, right? They were
Yes.
supporting it. They had staff that were supporting it. To go from that, where a government is backing that, to a government and an administration where they're holding FTC workshops to discuss whether or not this is something that should be legal and potentially, as you just said, putting out subpoenas to crack down on it, I don't think you could overstate how monumental that shift is. I don't know if you want to reflect on that at all, but my goodness, what a change America is experiencing on this.
The contrast couldn't be more stark, Billy. And whatever people think of President Trump, uh, this was his executive order on January 28th that the Federal Trade Commission was doing its workshop, in keeping with that order. From what I understand, FTC Chairman Andrew Ferguson, who I met, got to meet, and he was actually one of the hosts of the event. He had apparently been wanting to go after this on these grounds for some time, and other commissioners as well, who they all spoke yesterday at this event. And so it was just an extraordinary time. The federal agencies are 180-degree turn from the previous administration, and I really think that if everything lines up well, we could be seeing. I'm not going to count my chickens before they hatch here. Some death blows be laid to this beast. Of course, we need to pray because this is some of the worst evil and child abuse that the world has ever seen. And so it won't go down without a fight, of course. But it was just, I cannot overstate just the impact that this event had and will be felt. I especially think that as these clips of some of the event, so many people were in tears just listening to the detransitioners talked about how their bodies were torn apart, how their families were crushed. I mean, these clips get out and the real truth, can be seen online. I mean, it's sunlight is the best disinfectant. And as the truth continues to come out, I believe it will be unstoppable in terms of the reckoning. But we have to pour on the steam and, pedal to the metal. Now is the time when we really dig in because we have a window of an opportunity here to show the world the crimes against humanity that have been committed in the name of gender in this fraud. Um, History books need to record just what it was like during this time when the whole world, but especially America, seems to have lost its mind that it's somehow possible for children to become the other sex, for humans to become a different sex, and then drug them and cut them in pursuit of that impossibility. I mean, it's just one of the craziest things in history. And so, but there's just no question that now, whatever people think of President Trump, his administration is taking this issue very seriously, and uh, I think this is just the first step in many ways to seeing a long-awaited turnaround and reckoning around it. And so, yeah, we need to keep praying.
Well, one other issue here to address, this FTC workshop is dealing with minors, but is there a broader argument from your perspective to make that it could be expanded beyond that to all people? Because it does seem some of the same arguments being made for young people being transitioned are the same that are made for adults, right? That you'll be happier, that you'll be in the right body. I mean, is it possible that there are deceptive practices from your perspective going on for all Americans in this camp, not just younger Americans?
That's true. I mean, the focus of the event was on children, and I think people across the political spectrum have an impulse to protect those who are underage. But the truth of the matter is that it's not good for adults either, and because again, it starts with a lie. Humans can't change sex. Medical ethics has died and sort of gone the way of the dodo bird. I mean, just think about how abnormal it is that we actually think our medical societies and associations and hospitals actually defend as good the cutting off of physically healthy body parts. How much sense does that make? Just because someone feels like it with no medical, ethical reasoning. The only time you would ever remove a physically healthy organ would be for the presence of a physical disease like cancer, not because of a psychological distress about it. But the ruling, dogma of the day has just captured so many institutions, and atrocities have been unleashed because of these insane lies that are reigning at the tops of all these cultural entities. And so uh, the children, I think, serve as the justification for a lot of what the adults want to do. And that just makes it all the worse because when children are being hurt, I think, again, that just taps into something primal in most people, where whether you're religious or not, nobody wants to see a child be abused. You have to be just a sadistic sociopath monster to want to do that to children. But there are monsters among us that are indeed harming children deliberately, and that's an uncomfortable reality. But some of the gender doctors who have been on the forefront of this, who are abusing children, their names were named. And so the FTC now knows, look, if you want to sort of target rich environment, who to investigate, we've literally listed the names of the individuals and the institutions that have been doing these despicable things to young people and their families. And so here's hoping that they take that to heart and start some investigative work. And some of that's already happening.
Well, I so appreciate you breaking this all down. And before we go, you spoke on that final panel, and I want to give you a chance to reflect a little bit on what you spoke about and what it was like for you. You know, you've worked very hard on this issue. You've covered it more than almost anybody else, probably more than anybody else. What was it like to be given that opportunity to go before the FTC in this workshop and share?
I think, Billy, what it really felt like was the culmination of 8.5 to 9 years of grisly, gritty, hard work journalistically in the trenches. It was just, they have the opportunity to be on the final panel in a federal government agency that they sponsored that forum with some of the best people I know who've been hard at it as well. It was vindicating. It was amazing. I mean, I was getting text messages from parents of kids who've been maimed and sterilized, just overflowing with gratitude and joy that federal lawyers were taking action and were hearing their concerns for the first time. I said yesterday during my remarks that so many of these moms and dads who've suffered have been living in a straitjacket of silence, because even from within their own homes and neighborhoods, they don't feel like they can talk about it. And just so to see them have a voice in a federal government forum in DC with the commissioners of the Federal Trade Commission listening and promising to take action, that's just a sweet, sweet victory. And so, while again, I'm not going to get too far ahead of my skis here, there's people are bursting with hope. And one of the whistleblowers who was there testifying yesterday said that, unlike when they have gone and testified in support of prohibitions on blockers, hormones, and surgeries at the state level, they actually felt like they were being heard yesterday. That the wind was truly at our backs yesterday in Washington, D.C., federal government forum. It felt like a big deal and a definite turning point. And this is history now. This is in the archives of the Federal Trade Commission. This is a record of what the government has done, and it was an extraordinary day, and I was just honored to be a part of it and help the commissioners put on a great event.
Well, I so appreciate you taking the time, breaking it all down today. It's an important issue, and we'll continue to track with you as new developments unfold. Thanks so much, Brandon.
Thank you, Billy.
Everyone else, make sure you tune in next week for another episode of The Inside Story. In the meantime, head on over to the Christian Post. We'll see you again next week.